Hi everyone, I'm Yue Yen Wong from Faculty of Pharmacy, UiTM, Cawangan, Pulau Pinang. On behalf of my team members, we would like to share research findings entitled University Students' Perception on Good Qualities of an Educator and Online Learning. Let me begin quickly with why we embark on this study. Educators are important members of the society because they transmit knowledge and pass on wisdom to others. Studies have shown that competent educators have 4 times the influence on students' performance compared to the least potent educators. And be aware that COVID-19 had caused disruptions to education systems both worldwide and in Malaysia. While a variety of teaching and learning methods had been employed by educators during the pandemic, many students struggled with online learning. Therefore, the best teaching and learning methods have yet to be determined. To date, there has been limited study of investigating university students, particularly in Malaysia, regarding their perceptions on the good qualities of an educator. Most of the previous studies were from foreign countries, including from Turkey, Australia, and Singapore. Only one previous Malaysian study investigated faculty members' perspectives on ideal characteristics of an effective medical teacher. These previous findings cannot be generalized to Malaysian university students because of different education system, curricular requirements, cultural context, and also beliefs. It is also unclear if students in Malaysia achieve additional educators' attributes are required for online and distance learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. For your information, the abbreviation ODL will be used in my subsequent presentation. This study aimed to determine university students' perception on good qualities of an educator and to explore ideal traits of an educator while implementing ODL during the COVID-19 pandemic. We employed cross-sectional online survey whereby the questionnaire were adapted and modified from previous studies. The students were required to rate either agree or disagree on 25 statements corresponding to educators' qualities. Students were also invited to provide comments on 4 open-ended questions, soliciting their ideal opinions on ODL implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. The study was conducted for 3 months via Google Form. We employed convenient sampling whereby full-time students from UiTM Cawangan Pulau Pinang who are willing to participate in the study were invited to fill up the questionnaire. This study had received ethics approval. In terms of data analysis, quantitative data were performed using IBM SPSS, whereby descriptive statistics were conducted. In terms of qualitative data, namely students' comments, content analysis were carried out. We first coded students' comments according to categories. We then arranged similar categories together, either collapse them or merge them together in order to generate an overarching theme. We then calculated the total number of students' comments, with higher frequency denotes higher number of comments. The content analysis was performed with the aid of Excel software. Of 126 respondents, most of them were female with a median age of 21.5 years. A larger number of respondents were from Part 6 or Semester 6. Most of them were undertaking their diploma program, and a larger number of respondents were from the pharmacy program. Interestingly, all students unanimously agree that a good educator should be credible, enthusiastic in teaching, knowledgeable, considerate, fair and unbiased, and should have systematic lesson plan readily available for students. In contrast, 10.3% of students felt that a good educator does not need to master non-verbal communication methods. 8.7% of students felt that a good educator does not necessarily make their contact information available after office hours. 7.5% of students felt that educator does not necessarily need to assist students in setting up personal goals. 4% of students felt that a good educator does not necessarily teach only topics that will be examined in the examination. Of the 126 respondents, more than half of them felt that they were satisfied on the ODL implemented during the COVID-19. We identified 6 themes contributed to student satisfaction level. The most rated or most commented factors contribute to student satisfactions were that students felt that ODL allows flexible learning hours. Students also felt that most of the lecturers had tried or strived to explain topics related to the subjects using online platform effectively. Students satisfied in terms of lecturers who were accommodating and had provided resources to students in their learning. Some students commented that their lecturers were very committed and easily accessible. Students also provided comments whereby their lecturers had provided necessary or rich learning resources for them during the ODL. A smaller number of students felt that they were very adaptive to the change and were comfortable with the online classes conducted during the ODL. In contrast, 6 themes were identified that contribute to student dissatisfactions on ODL, namely, poor internet connections were most disturbing during the ODL because they could not focus on the lecture. The long study hours, screen time, sitting hours were deemed not healthy for students. Home environment with lots of distractions were also deemed not conducive for ODL learning. During the lockdown, there were lack of communications between students and lecturers. Some lecturers tend to read from the slides without additional explanations for the contents, which students deemed were not effective for ODL. Some students also lamented the lack of practical activities during the lockdown. Interestingly, students felt that interpersonal characteristics, namely compassion and empathetic, were most ideal during ODL implementations, unlike technological competent, engaging teaching skills. Several themes were identified which were deemed motivating ODL learning. Due to time benefits, we attempt to highlight several most rated themes which deem motivating students during the ODL. First of all, continuous motivation and moral support were deemed most helpful during the ODL. Interactive learning activity, such in the case of organizing Q&A session at the end of the classes, performing or carrying out revision class before test, and integrating creative or interactive teaching methods such as humors during the teaching were deemed able to maintain students' attention span during the ODL. In contrast, students were demotivated by overwhelming assignments given the ODL. Some students lamented that the lecturers had used inappropriate platforms for conducting ODL, and the lectures were too bland and too long for them to stay focused. Students were also not happy with lecturers who were not considerate, whereby they were being sarcastic during lectures and talking about things that are not relevant to the lecture content. Students also commented that some lecturers had used inconducive learning platform, for instance, using only recorded video or YouTube for their lectures were deemed demotivating for ODL learning. And lastly, lecture notes with too many words and sentences with big fonts were not favored by students for ODL. These studies had shows that good educators should be credible, enthusiastic in teaching, knowledgeable, considerate, and unbiased. Such characteristics were consistent with previous studies in Malaysia as well as in Singapore. This could probably due to similar questionnaire used. On top of that, our study add on finding that students from a variety of academic disciplines find that lecturers who can prepare a systematic lesson plan will be helpful for the students. More than half of respondents in the study were satisfied with the ODL implemented during the lockdowns. This was largely due to the flexibility of learning hours, which is consistent with previous studies. It is important to note that poor internet connections had interrupted students' learning in this study and also previous studies. Majority of students value educators who are compassionate, considerate while teaching during the academic as shown in the study findings. While ODL offers flexibility in learning, it is largely student-driven, whereby it requires strong motivation to boost students' involvement and engagement with the learning process. This underscores that the educator need to be proactively in providing ongoing moral support. It is important for all educators, including myself, to take note that not to overwhelm the students with assignments and tasks during the ODL because this could take tolls on students' physical and mental well-being. Similar study findings had been also shown in a previous study which involved a larger sample size of students in universities Malaysia, whereby over 2/3 of the respondents felt that they were overwhelmed with the workload and that many struggled to keep up with their courses online. As a conclusion, this study had successfully reviewed the perceptions of good qualities of educators among students of various academic disciplines, namely credible, enthusiastic in teaching, knowledgeable, considerate, unbiased, and have a systematic lesson plan. Lecturers compassionate and empathetic, providing continuous motivation and moral supports are the highly rated attributes and approaches for motivating students ODL during the pandemic. Notably, poor internet connection and overwhelming assignments could potentially deter students from ODL. With that, thank you very much for your attention.